Hey, it's Richard Miller again, Facts for Working People. I've been thinking about what to do over the last couple of days to put on the blog, things to say. As I've mentioned, I can't really write very well right now, but something just sort of, there's a number of things that have been going through my head, and something just spurred me to sort of try again to do it. And what I wanted to say was, I was just reading the internet here, reading on the news about Trump. I mean, I'm not fascinated with Trump or anything like that, but some guy, Levin, he's the former CEO of Time Warner, I think it is, AOL Time Warner, something like that. He's written a letter because Trump's into it with John Lewis, you know, the veteran of the civil rights movement. And I'd written a piece just actually the other day about, I remember seeing Jackson cry when Obama was nominated to be the candidate for the president of the United States, and I was watching Jackson cry, and some people put Jackson down quite heavily, but those were real tears. It was a historic thing, and Jackson was on that balcony when King was killed, and Trump is talking about this man and talking to this man, John Lewis, complete disrespect. No matter how much, whether you agree with him, he's a Democrat, his politics or whatever. Trump is a dirty individual. So this guy Levin has written a letter, and he's talked about the McCarthy period when he was growing up. He's not a CEO anymore, and he says, "Don't you have a sense of decency, sir?" This was what was said during the McCarthy period there by some sort of politician. Haven't you got a sense of decency, sir? Well, I'll tell you, no, he doesn't have a sense of decency. Trump doesn't have a sense of decency at all. And this guy Levin, he says one of his concerns is, you're going to be the proprietor. Basically, what it is, it's the issue of being the president of the United States. This bull about the sanctity of the office. And he says, you are going to be the proprietor of American exceptionalism. And this is really what they're worried about. Just like they were very worried when Trump said he may not accept the election results. They were concerned about the legitimacy of their system, their phony democracy, their phony elections and everything else. That was more, they had more of a concern about that than anything. It delegitimizes it, even though many workers have already gotten to that point. But so he says you're going to be the proprietor of American exceptionalism. Well, what is American exceptionalism? That America is special, it's different. It's a paragon of liberty and individualism and laissez-faire free markets of capitalism, basically, and completely unfettered capitalism, democracy, and this sort of thing. That's one aspect of it. Also, that it will transform the world. Its role is to transform the world in its own image. And the fact that we are, America is the American exceptionalism, and that its role is to transform the world in this special exceptional image, that makes America superior. This is the ideology of the American ruling class. Okay, it's actually what we call in England, it's bollocks, and it's not the first ruling class that has this image of itself, and every ruling class has to claim that it's the end of civilization. They have to justify their own existence. They all believed they were exceptional, and then they passed that down into the ranks of the middle class, and into the working class especially, through the middle classes who are all scrambling to rise higher and higher in the pecking order in society. I mean, in the feudal aristocracy under feudalism in Britain, what was their exceptionalism? The king was the king by divine right. He was there as the God's vicar, they used to say. It was very hard for the English revolutionists to overcome that and cut off the head or destroy the system and the head of that system that they believed was there by God's will. And of course, I always say Cromwell came along and said, well, let's cut off his head and we'll see what happens, and a new day was born. So with America, if you take the American bourgeois, I mean, they feel that they are an arrogant, crass, crude ruling class, the most violent of all the ruling classes, and all of the bourgeois ruling classes in the different nations. When they came in, when they invaded this country, when they came to this country, and when was the first English settlement? 1607, 1608 in Jamestown. What did they have to do? They had to bring labour with them. And import labour here. They first had to wipe out a couple of million native people. Engels always put it that way, that one of the reasons they were so vulgar and crass was that was what they had to do here. They didn't have to. They didn't have to wage a 300-year-old, 200-year-old ideological struggle against the ruling class, against the feudal aristocracy like the British did. Just had to wipe out the native people and build some infrastructure and import some labour. And of course the slavery was one aspect of that, but all the Europeans that came here were poor. You read about the first settlement here and who was here. It was entrepreneurs, people with money, and then they lied, cajoled, forced British and German and European and Irish labour here and stole black people from Africa here. That's the history in this country. It's a history of violence. There's nothing exceptional about it, of course, because that's history in general in class society. So this idea of American exceptionalism, that it's something different, is just absolute nonsense. But Levin believes it, you see. Levin believes it. That's why he's appealing to Trump on that basis. Of course, Trump is a degenerate. He doesn't have a sense of decency. He's a degenerate member of of Levin's class. He is in the same class as Levin, the ruling class. He represents the ruling class. He's a degenerate member of the ruling class, of the capitalist class in this country. He's a racist. He's a misogynist. He's actually not very bright. You don't have to be bright to be powerful and rich. His dad left him millions of dollars. I could have made money. Any of us could have made money if we'd have been given what he's been given. Talk about welfare. And that was money. That's slumlord money. That's somebody else's rent. And so he's not very bright. Look at Bush. Bush is the same. He was the product of a copulation between two rich people. He wasn't very bright either. He was just very fortunate that he was born in the way he was. Obama was a lot smarter than all of them, and that's part of what's so distasteful about him in some ways. He's much sharper than those guys, but he's on the same team, and that's something we should not forget. That's something that we must be careful and be diligent about, that he's on the same team, because they have all sorts of tricks to convince us that we're all in the same boat. So Trump, what brings me to this is, or what it brings me to is that Trump is you see all this stuff, dump Trump, get rid of Trump, rally against Trump. Well, what if we stop Trump? What's the next step? Hillary Clinton? Another one of them? Yes, she's not as crude. Obama wasn't as crude. Even Bush wasn't as crude. He's just a complete imbecile. But the question is, this is not just about Trump. What he is a degenerate, a depraved representative of a decaying system, of a decaying, degenerate system. That's the reality of it. And, that book Halbertson wrote about the best and the brightest, and in the post-war era, during the post-war boom, when America was the dominant power on earth, its rivals had been destroyed in terms of their productive forces and everything else, and the huge growth in the American middle class and the material conditions that led to the ideology of the American dream. It was a different type of leadership then. Trump is a reflection of a different period, and that's how we have to look at history. He's a reflection of capitalism in decay, in degenerating. And if you look at them. They're in capitalism as in severe political and economic crisis. American capitalism and global capitalism, but American in particular, because it's in between that period. It is losing its global influence. Its rivals, particularly China and Russia, are emerging as serious threats to it. It's the most heavily armed, though. This is the difference when British colonialism was losing its position of world power. British colonialism fought a violent war against the Mau Mau, the Kikuyu in Kenya, even though they knew their days were numbered. It was a very violent war because these people are violent people. And so Look at them here. They couldn't find a candidate in this election. They didn't have anybody that they would like to have had. And so they eventually, you even have right-wing Republicans ending up supporting Hillary Clinton. Trump was so disgusting to them because they do like to keep. He was whipping up racism and whipping up all this hatred and everything else, appealing to the most backward elements of society. And they'll do that. The bourgeois use that. That's why you'll never eliminate racism and capitalism. But they don't. They're very cautious and very calculated about how and when they raise these divisions and increase these divisions. But they chose Hillary Clinton and they didn't get her. The candidate they chose, they wanted, they lost that as well. So there's a real serious crisis in American capitalism, and Trump is a reflection of it. And so the last thing I wanted to say is what I've been thinking about over the last few days, because myself and a woman I know, we were down the pub and she got to chat with me, a working class woman, solid working class woman in her 30s. She's a black African American woman. And she said to me, like so many people do, my co-workers used to, and we're told in this country, I don't talk politics. Well, they tell us not to talk politics. They talk politics. They meet at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They're meeting in Davos, the global capitalist today. Politics is serious for them. They want for us, it's simply a matter of sticking a piece of paper in a ballot box. So consequently, it's boring for us. It's not real for us. We fought and won the right to suffrage, and some people later than others, black people, women, Native Americans, and that sort of thing. And so they want us just put a piece of paper in a ballot box and elect one of our guys every 4 years. But they talk politics. We don't think in a political way. We're not conscious. We don't think of Trump as a product of the system. We don't think of the betrayals by the Democrats and the trade union leaders are to do with politics and political parties and what political parties represent. And so we don't look at history either in that way. And history is all about politics, and in different periods of history. You know, they talk about exceptionalism. When I was growing up, what was I supposed to sing? Britain rule the waves. You don't think they have songs? All capitalist nation states have songs about how exceptional they are. America has the biggest stick. It is the most powerful nation so far, and it's had a short history, but it's over. It's over. The system is in serious crisis. But we have to talk politics. We have to talk politics from our perspective. I saw a thing the other day about the healthcare, Obamacare, and they were talking about replacing it. All from their point of view. All about how you can keep profit going. Not from our point of view. I don't care about profits. I demand what we need. We need housing. We need healthcare. We need this, that, and the other. So that's what doesn't take place. They have hundreds of think tanks where they discuss these issues. We have none. As I've mentioned before, we have one, Facts for Working People. We have a think tank, and we've invited people to that. And if you're interested in getting involved in it, we have phone conferences once every week to discuss these issues. But that's something we have to completely reject, that we don't discuss politics. We need to discuss politics. We need to discuss history to understand exactly what the hell's going on in society, because with nuclear weapons, with the situation that there is today, the environmental crisis, which is probably the most serious crisis in terms of what it can actually, the damage it can actually do, is they will eliminate life as we know it on this planet. They will. And we have an obligation to our children to do something about that. I know it's difficult. The trade union leaders do nothing. There's no social force as such. There's lots of different activities going on, but we have to recognize that we cannot ignore what's going on around us, and we have to look at the world in a different way, and we have to look at the world from our own class. I don't believe that prior to the Second World War, American workers called themselves middle class. We're working class people, the vast majority of us, and that's how we have to see the world, see our strength as a class. We have the numbers, and we can put a stop to this mess, and we can build a future for our children and our grandchildren. These are just a few thoughts I had today, because I couldn't get anything up on the blog, and I've been thinking about this. So that's Richard Miller, Facts for Working People. Talk to you soon.